Good evening. I'm Seth Norton, Director of the Hastert Center at Wheaton College. I'd like to welcome you to this event, God, People, Management, East Meets West. Panel discussion with some distinguished participants. Before we start our discussion tonight, I would like to welcome Dr. Philip Ryken, President of Wheaton College, for a short announcement.
Given that this event is sponsored by the Hastert Center, we wanted to take advantage of this public occasion for me to read just a part of a commendation from the Board of Trustees, in which the trustees of Wheaton College acknowledge Mr. Hastert partly for his public service as a school teacher, coach, and representative of the people, also as providing visionary leadership for the Hastert Center, and particularly marking a major milestone in the center's development, in that we have exceeded our initial goal of $10 million for the construction program and endowment of the Hastert Center. And therefore, the trustees want to express publicly their gratitude to Mr. Hastert himself for his initiative in proposing the Hastert Center, his generous donation of papers related to his public service, his strong leadership in securing these funds through gifts and grants, particularly his demonstrated commitment to the students of Wheaton College, and in expressing our gratitude to Mr. Hastert, the trustees also recognize that all of these gifts come from God and are to be used in the service of His glory. If you want to see the complete text of the trustee commendation, it is now on a very nice plaque on the first floor of the Hastert Center. But Mr. Hastert, can I ask you to stand and be acknowledged for your commitment to the work of the Hastert Center?
Let me introduce the participants in our panel tonight. First participant is Joe Maciariello. Joe is an endowed chair professor at the Peter Drucker Graduate School, Drucker-Edo Graduate School, Claremont College, Claremont Universities. Joe is an expert on Peter Drucker. He's a colleague of Peter Drucker. He is a co-author with Peter Drucker. He's an expert on the subject of management and the liberal arts and integrating management in the liberal arts. He is a committed Christian. He's been active as a management professor, but also in church governance and church and consulting to churches, as was Peter Drucker, especially the large mega churches on the West Coast. Joe has also been visiting Wheaton College as a visiting professor in the Hastert Center, teaching a course on management as a liberal art. We're delighted to have him here. Dr. Zhao, Peter, as I prefer to call him. My native tongue is Lingala. Makes it a little hard to pronounce Asian names at times, but I have a brother named Peter, so that's a lot easier. Peter is a distinguished economist from China, native of China. He has a great story of testimony, which will come out during the discussion tonight, I'm sure. He's currently has visiting positions at Harvard University and also Gordon Conwell Seminary, and he's doing some research, the intersection of faith and economics. We're delighted to have Dr. Zhao here. Finally, our third speaker is Benny Yang. Benny is an expert on church life, Christian life in China. He's a Christian activist, and he is conceivably the best informed person on the church in China. We'll welcome Benny to being here. We will start our questions with our first question. Before we start our first question, let me make a couple of announcements. We will have a panel discussion here. At the end, we would like some time for question and answers. So we will have questions passed out, and we would appreciate if you have questions to fill out the question cards, and we will have surreptitious people fetch them for us on the aisles. And that'll happen about 3/4 of the way through the evening. We'll collect them and have a question and answer period. We'd also appreciate it if you'd fill out the assessment forms. Okay, are you ready? Joe, Dr. Zhao, Benny?
Let's go.
Dr. Zhao, you are a Christian and also a member of the Communist Party. How can you reconcile those facts given the atheist and secular basis of the Communist Party in China?
I went to Germany a couple of weeks ago.
我参加了他们一个3000个基督徒商人领袖的大会。
I was in there one of their marketplace conferences with 3,000 Christian business people in Germany.
然后我带了一个中国的基督徒商人的代表团去参加。
I took a Chinese Christian businessman delegation, went there.
当我们出现在会场的时候呢，他们非常的惊讶。
When we were show up on the conference room, they were very surprised.
因为在德国的德国人看来这个中国的基督徒都是要关到集中营去。
Because from German perspective, all the Chinese Christians should be served in jail.
怎么会有这么一帮人？
Where comes from this whole group of Chinese Christian business people?
所以我们知道这个有一些事情在中国这个就有一些变化在中国发生了。
You know, there are some changes in China. It is possible, and it is a reality.
我是2002年被中国政府派到美国来做访问。
I was sent to U.S. by Chinese central government on 2002 with a study project, research mission.
那么中国政府呢，希望我做一项研究，就是比较美国的市场经济跟中国的市场经济有什么样的区别。
The central government gave me assignment to do a comparative study, research between Chinese market economy system and versus U.S. market economy system.
然后中国的市场经济还可以从美国的市场经济那里边学到一些什么？
And then what we should learn as Chinese market economy system, what we should learn from U.S. Is there anything more we should learn from them?
结果我发现最大的不同就是美国到处是教堂，而中国到处是澡堂。
I discovered the biggest differences is between China and U.S. A market economy system is that in U.S. you see churches everywhere. In China you see bath houses everywhere.
所以我就写了一
bath houses.
所以我就写了一篇文章，叫《有教堂的市场经济与无教堂的市场》。
So I wrote an article called "The Market Economy with Church versus Market Economy without the Church."
然后我就指出美国的市场经济背后是有信仰伦理作为它的根基。
So I pointed out behind the American market economy system there is a faith and ethical support.
然后中国没有这个根基。
We don't have that in China.
然后我就给中国政府提建议，说我们的市场化转型也要关注这样一个。
So I gave the policy recommendation to the central government says in our economy reforms we need to consider the ethical perspective.
那么这是中国历史上第一次有人从信仰这样一个角度来比较不同的市场经济。
This is the first time it has been done from academic people that compare the market economy system based on the faith perspective.
那么这篇文章在中国是公开发表的，而且被评为改革开放影响中国大陆最重要的100篇文章之一。
It was rated as the 100 articles that have influence that has the largest influence on the Chinese economy reformation process in China, which means this article was widely read and publicly published.
而且我相信中国政府呢也接受了这样的一个建议。
I believe the Chinese government accepted this kind of suggestion, which is take the moral perspective to see the market economy system.
所以我想说的是比如说我们知道约瑟呢是在埃及来服侍法老王。
What I want to say is that Joseph served the Pharaoh in Egypt in the cabinet.
但以理是在一个完全的异教的国家服侍。
Daniel served in a totally even worse country than China.
但是他们都受到欢迎。
But they were all welcomed.
因为他们都是忠心的管家
because they are a faithful servant.
他们都祝福了他们所在的国家以及他们所服侍的领袖
Faithful steward, and also they blessed the country and the people they live with.
所以我相信，如果我们愿意做一个忠心的管家来服务我们的国家的时候行善是没有人能够禁止。
So I believe if I want to be really a good steward and serve my country, so there's no end to love people and no end to do the good works.
基督徒在到处都会被欢迎。
Christian will be welcomed in everywhere places.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Maciariello, question 2. You have a long, distinguished career teaching management. You have taught undergraduate, graduate, MBA, PhD courses in management. In your experience, do American MBA students affirm integrity? Second question off of that, what about American executives?
In this question, as in all of the questions, I've gone to my very best examples, whether they're recent or distant. And I confirmed with the parties involved the right to speak about this. I have 2 examples from my MBA and PhD work. One is from a person of enormous integrity, a woman who I happen to have the pleasure of teaching as an executive student, and then went on to supervise her dissertation. She worked her way up to the head of one of the largest naval laboratories in the country, and at the very top of the executive civil service ladder. And she was also executive director of research and engineering for all of these centers across the United States. She is a person of exemplary talent and character. And her organization was characterized by incredible talent and integrity. It's a 6,000-person, mostly man, organization. She happened to find herself on the base closing commission during the latter 2 years of her service, which put it in the Bush administration. And we had a number of occasions about the difficulties that the Base and Realignment Commission was having. Of course, Speaker Hester would know all about this. It's vicious work. And this woman who was such a model of integrity came back week after week with stories of the infighting that was going on amongst the heads of various service departments. She had never experienced such a lack of integrity in her whole career. On the other hand, the dissertation research uncovered the positive example of a defense contractor, Texas Instrument, and its CEO, Jerry Junkins. Junkins was president, chairman, and chief executive officer of TI, one of the leading defense contractors and technology companies in the United States. He died prematurely of a heart attack while on a business trip on May 30th, 1996. Near the end of his life, he was confronted with inquiries from employees who were sent abroad to sign a contract for the technology products of Texas Instrument. They told Junkins that the customer was ready to sign but wanted a bribe. And Junkins took the news, got on a company plane, and went to see his executives and the customer. He explained to the customer in no uncertain terms, TI does not do bribes. He took his 2 executives back to Dallas with him on the plane. That was a powerful example of integrity that lasts to this day within a Texas Instrument. I happened to be in Dallas the day he died. and he was extolled by the Dallas press for his distinguished record of leadership. We don't often hear the favorable stories of what's going on amongst the CEOs of our nation.
Thank you.
I experienced another powerful example of integrity when I was a professor at Union College in Schenectady, New York. The school was going through large deficits, and it was typical of the period of the 70s. Its president, Harold C. Martin, was a tall Calvinist behaving type academic who came to Union from Harvard, where he was head of the Harvard preceptorial program and wrote extensively about plagiarism, right down to the minute detail. You couldn't miss it if you were a student or a professor. He held this 200-plus-year-old college together during a major financial crisis by the sheer force of his character and work ethic. He communicated frequently in his brilliant style to all stakeholders the purpose of the various decisions, and because of the trust he earned by his character and by his tireless effort on behalf of the faculty, staff, students, and alumni and parents, these constituents redoubled their effort to absolutely pull this liberal arts college through and set the stage for the college to absolutely thrive, which it is doing now again.
Let me ask you this as a follow-up question. What's the greatest impediment to management integrity in the U.S.?
Yeah, all organizations have values and codes, ethical codes. All large organizations have statements of ethical codes. The greatest barrier is that they don't always believe the values embedded in the codes. I learned the founder of ServiceMaster, Marion Wade, said it best: if you don't live it, you don't believe it. And codes of conduct often seek to protect the company without encouraging the development of moral values and integrity among employees. Often companies are so performance-oriented that they overlook shoddy behavior by high-performing but unethical executives, and other employees notice. And they get cynical, and ultimately this destroys the spirit of the organization, it destroys its performance, and it destroys the motivation of people. I had a paper written last semester that got me so deep within. It was from a woman who was witnessing the damage that middle management now was inflicting on the knowledge workers of one of America's largest companies. This is a lesson from Drucker. Intelligence is a highly valued attribute amongst executives, but integrity is more important, because the lack of integrity can destroy people, can destroy spirit, and can ultimately destroy performance. So the answer to your question is the greatest impediment to integrity is placing intelligence and results above all. And the unwritten notion, the ends justify the means. Okay.
Thank you. Dr. Zhao, similar question for China. What's the greatest impediment to management integrity in contemporary China?
这个中国的诚信的问题可能比美国要严重。
We have probably much more serious problem in this area than U.S., which will have much more problems in the ethic and integrity area.
可以说诚信的危机在中国非常的严重。
The crisis for integrity or business ethics actually is very severe.
比如大家发现政府的很多的承诺是不可信的。
But even though you found lots of government promises is unbelievable, you cannot trust it.
政府比如说它一定要控制房地产的价格。
It's like the government want to control the price for the housing.
那么但是呢，房地产的价格每年都在上涨。
But the housing price is going up every year.
政府也在鼓励别人说你们要这个生一个孩子鼓励别人生一个孩子，然后说，养老政府会帮你养老。
And then the government encourages people to have one child, which is one child policy. The government promises us we'll take care of your retire life.
但政府现在说了，这个养老得靠你们自己，我们不可能帮你们。
But now the government says, no, the retirement is on your own. We can't help you too much.
所以政府有诚信的危机。
So the government has an integrity crisis.
很多人听政府说话会反着来听。
And then people who listen to what government says, they will listen to the extremely other end, which means if you say yes, that means no. If you say no, that means yes.
然后食品有诚信危机。
And then our food industry has a crisis on integrity.
在中国一个特别大的问题就是大家不知道该吃什么。
And there's the biggest problem in China is we don't know what to eat. What shall we eat?
因为几乎没有安全的食品。
Because there's almost no security no security in the food.
牛奶也有危机。
The milk.
因为所有的牛奶几乎都有这样或者那样的问题。
And all the milk you have problem with this or problem with that.
所以现在很多人从国外来购买奶粉。
So even the milk powder was the most welcomed merchandise from overseas right now.
然后引起这个欧美国家的惊慌。
And even it was worried those European or North American countries.
然后这个企业的这个财务也是有诚信问题。
And then the private company, they have also the integrity problem. I mean, even not much company has, they have two sets of the books.
那么有的企业，这个很多的中国企业不是一本账。
Yeah, a lot of companies they have, not just one set of the financial books or accounting books.
而是有好多本账。
They have many accounting books, depending which one you want.
而有些企业可能一本账都没有。
And even some company they don't have accounting books at all.
然后很多的这个工程也有问题。
And lots of even construction engineering projects has integrity issues.
刚刚建好的桥梁会突然就倒塌了。
And then you just build the bridge, and then 6 months after that, the bridge falls down.
刚刚修好的路这个突然就坏了。
And the road you just built it maybe 6 months ago, and then 6 months later you're trying to fix it.
所以你们看到中国的 GDP 增长很快。
You see, China has a higher GDP growth rate every year.
因为这个桥呢，这个路修的时候算一道 GDP.
Because we kept fixing it. When you build it, it's a GDP. When you fix it, it's another GDP growth.
所以我们知道这个诚信危机是中国目前最大的危机。
The integrity crisis is the largest crisis we have nowadays in China.
而且几乎表现在各个方面。
And then it was reviewed in almost every aspect of life.
Thank you. Dr. Maciariello, can a manager be a servant leader in American publicly owned companies?
Yes. I have, I believe, 3 examples here that have been outstanding examples in my career. They articulate a vision, they treat human resources as assets, and they do all they can to break down barriers that hinder people from acting responsible in accordance with the vision and values that the company sets up. I had 3 very powerful examples in my first 3 jobs at 2 companies right out of college. First, I had the opportunity to be the controller of the backpack that Neil Armstrong wore on the moon's surface. It was called the Portable Life Support System. The vision articulated by President Kennedy was to send a man to the moon and to return him safely by the end of the decade, an objective that we as a nation accomplished. But little known, buried somewhere, was this portable life support system, this backpack that was the environmental control system for Neil Armstrong on the moon. The manager of that project had worked on the shop floor at Hamilton Standard, making propellers and other and environmental control systems while going to the Western New England College evenings to get a degree in industrial engineering. He was put in charge of the portable life support system project. He just broke glass to eliminate hindrances for his people and to support them publicly within the company and with the customer, which was NASA. NASA ranked the PLSS program NASA ranked the PLSS program as the best program among the 100,000 NASA Apollo programs, and this was largely due to the extraordinary effort of this project team led by this servant leader. He created a high-performing organization. Second, in the same division, we had a division controller. His name was John Koss, who I reported to at Hamilton Standard. John operated with extraordinarily financial integrity when confronting executives to write down previously booked profits, hard thing to do, because of subsequent massive cost overruns on contracts. And this is the tough part, to give back bonuses previously awarded to executives based upon booked profits. Obviously, John became very unpopular with the division vice presidents. So he had to choose between his job and his belief that the controller had to be the conscience of the division. The corporate controller, Haddon Stone, interesting, he was the first bow tie executive I saw until I met people at ServiceMaster. Never saw executives wear bow ties. And then I learned it was a real cultural thing, and kind of cute, kind of nice. John Koss was put on special assignment by Haddon Stone, who was the head of the controllership at the company, until he found an outside job because there was not a division president who wanted to hire him as their controller. He was tough-minded at a time when engineers really did not believe in designing to cost. We were all on cost-plus contracts, and all of a sudden the government changed to fixed price, and the definition of engineering, we were reminded, was to design to cost. John understood it. I found him to be one of the best bosses I ever had, tough but compassionate. These were both servant leaders. The last one is a widely known person, Admiral Hyman Rickover, of which Peter Drucker said, a Lithuanian Jew, only in America. And he interacted with the head of the Knowles Atomic Power Laboratory at the General Electric Company, which Rickover was the head of. GE was going to move Kesselring to their commercial nuclear business in San Jose, and the admiral said, "You move him and the contract is gone. Give him what it takes to keep him," was his order. And the company did, and shortly after, unfortunately, Ken Kesselring died. The admiral, who was known for his tough-minded quality and technical performance, almost a little dictator on those areas, but with a lot of clout before Congress, understood the brilliance of this man who was an engineer, yes, but who really understood how to manage people. And that laboratory continued to outperform the comparable laboratory set up at Westinghouse. The admiral knew that treating people well was key to CAPL's success, and probably the reason CAPL was consistently outperforming the Westinghouse unit. When Kesselring died, the admiral was still in command, and he renamed the nuclear power site where sailors were being trained for the nuclear navy, the Kenneth Kesselring site, a name it still bears today. These are all servant leaders. But I'll tell you, as I've written in an article on Nehemiah, servant leaders often come out bruised badly. John Koss did. Abraham Lincoln did. Christ did. So we shouldn't glamorize the concept. It's powerful. There are many examples, but it isn't all rosy. Yeah.
Thank you. Dr. Zhao, can a manager be a servant leader in a privately owned Chinese enterprise?
一个经理在中国的私营公司里面可不可以做一个 Prince 领袖？
我觉得是完全可以做的。
I think absolutely yes.
而且从长远来看哈，这个一个私人公司的老板啊，或者他的负责人啊，只有做 servant leader， 他的公司才有前途。
Actually, from long perspective, only a private company owner or a manager CEO, after they become a servant leader, that company could have real future.
企业实际上本质上来说有两种。
Enterprise company actually it has two kind.
一种是把员工当成是工具。
One kind treats staff as a tool.
那么这个来实现公司的盈利目标。
To treat employee as a tool to achieve the target or revenue target, whatever the company has.
那么这种公司呢，大多数都不能做得长久。
This kind of company, most of them does not lasting long.
另外一种公司呢，是把员工当成目标。
Another kind of company is treat the employee as their target. I mean, focus.
那么这个在实现员工的这个价值的同时那么实现了公司的利润。
And achieving the company target at the same time achieving the employees' best value or target. I mean, the value of their staff.
那我们看到现代的公司里边，其实呢人才的竞争是最主要的。
I think in the modern company or enterprises, the competition on the talents actually is the strongest competition.
那么所以呢，那些能够这个很好的去服务于员工的公司，他们有长远的竞争力。
Those companies who serve the employee well actually have the longer competitiveness in the business.
那么一开始的时候呢，我们对一些比如说基督徒的这个企业我们讲普伦斯领导的时候，他们开始是很困惑的。
In China, when we talk about servant leadership towards business people in China, Christian business leaders whatsoever, they are actually confused a little bit.
因为他们习惯了把员工当成实现利润的工具。
Because they are so they're just so used to use the staff as a tool to achieve their own personal goal.
但是当他们转向普伦斯的领导的时候呢，他们发现这个企业业绩比过去更好。
But when they switch the leadership style and they treat the staff really as a valuable person to achieve the benefit of the company together, they suddenly realize the revenue grows naturally.
所以我们在中国这个尤其是在这个就是我们说的这个不是上市公司的这一个层次的就私营的这个基督的商业企业里面呢，我们都在推广普伦斯的领导。
We are actually promoting and then doing a lot of trainings and promotings in especially private-owned Christian business enterprises, not the public-owned, but mostly private sectors.
我们相信不仅是基督徒的商业企业，而且非基督徒的商业企业将来也必须或多或少的学习普伦斯的领导。
So we are starting with the Christian business enterprise companies right now, but we believe not just the Christian company, which is not Christian company, the company was run by a Christian owner, but we believe those secular, normal original companies in China, private sector, they will also realize the importance of some leadership and apply in the future.
Dr. Zhao, let me go back and do a little bit of history and talk about China's history. What was the management style for enterprise, presumably state-owned enterprises, during Mao's years?
毛泽东的时候，国企的这个管理风格是什么样子的？哪个企业？
有一个说法就是在毛泽东的时代，中国是不存在企业的。
There is one saying that in Mao's time, there's no enterprise. There's no company exist.
因为当时的所谓的国有企业跟政府机关是没有任何区
The
别。
state-owned company at that time, actually, it is a government agency. It's nothing different than a government body system.
那么他们并不是为市场服务的。
It is their existence not serving the market at all. Their purpose is not serving the market at all.
也不是为员工服务。
And their purpose is not serving the staff at all. No, it's not.
他们是为国家的战略目标服务的。
They are the tools serving the government's strategic purposes.
同时他们要承担很多这个社会性的负担，就是 social burden。
They also have to take lots of social welfare and social responsibilities for the society.
所以那样的一个企业基本上是不能称之为企业的。
Those kind of company, actually, you cannot call it company.
他们的行为更像是政府机关的行为。
Their behavior actually is clearly government behavior.
Thank you. Dr. Maciariello, let's switch to the American society a little bit. Does the business press in the U.S. encourage management integrity in America?
I wish they did more than they do. The story I told of Jeremy Junkins was so outstanding at Texas Instrument that the Dallas press did really extol the virtue of this man, and it was such a powerful inspiration to anyone who wanted to aspire to executive leadership. Mostly, I see negative examples in the press, and it would be a great service to go out and identify really positive examples of CEOs that are serving the company and society well. I think there's one problem that needs to be solved, and that is what is perceived, at least, as excessive executive compensation. Compensation was a subject Drucker did devote some attention to. Compensation ought to be such that it is perceived within the organization as equitable and holds the company together. You know, it holds the company together. It doesn't cause schisms. Some of the numbers that are being reported right now are the difference between the CEO salary and the first level of the worker, whatever that professional or manufacturing level might be, of 300 to 1. Those are obnoxious, if they're true. Now, either the company ought to explain how those numbers were arrived at and why they're deceptive, and I know in many cases they are deceptive, or they ought to do away with this division that's being caused between the leading executives of companies and their own employees, but more importantly, the way government and the public perceive business. It's not good. During the tenure of Reginald Jones at General Electric, he saw as a major job this so-called rapprochement. He was British, and between government and business. I think we need that now, and I think we need real dialogue, government representing the public and business, and we need to deal with some of these misperceptions and realities about executive compensation. And then perhaps we'll get the positive press that will encourage the best of the brightest to go that way.
Thank you. Dr. Zhao, turning to China, does business press encourage management integrity in contemporary China?
中国的商业媒体现在是不是对商业诚信有很大的鼓励的成分，或者说很好的帮助？
我相信是的。
I believe so.
中国的商业媒体从他们的这个宣传来说从他们的这个言论来说，他们是非常鼓励诚信的。
China's business press, from their perspective, actually they encourage a lot of business integrities in China.
同时在过去这些年里边中国的商业媒体揭露了很多不诚信的案子。
Actually, the business press uncovered a lot of non-ethical business events or even disasters in the industry, in the society.
包括基金黑幕。
It's like some of the mismanagement on the investment fund.
包括上市公司的黑幕。
Including some of the inside stories and couldn't tell and told stories of the public IPO company.
那么都应该说发挥了正面的作用。
Actually, the business press has really act very positive, encourages on the business integrity in China generally.
但是另外一方面呢，这个商业媒体也有它的商业利益。
But on the other end, the business press has its business purpose, has its benefit. Kind of purpose in nature.
所以他们为了追求商业利益有的时候他们也卷入了不诚信的那些案件中。
But sometimes the business press, for the purpose of achieving their own business purposes, so they are involved in some non-ethical or integrity issues themselves.
所以好多上市公司的比如不真实的这些信息，可能是某些不负责任的商业媒体来披露的。
For example, some untrue informations of some IPO companies that some business press, helped them propaganda. Make false influence on investor whatsoever. So the business press sometimes they have their issues on themselves even.
所以我相信就是说这个两个方面的作用都同时存在。
So I think they have both roles and functions, whether they provide some positive and those at the same time they are in the same pit. So sometimes they have their own problems.
Thank you. Dr. Maciariello, you set out as a major research agenda to examine American business for the presence and practice of the kingdom of God. Did you find evidence of the kingdom of God in American management?
Yes. It was one of the most thrilling times of my life. Our church taught and tried to demonstrate the gospel of the kingdom following the teachings of Christ, and as expounded by George Elton Ladd, then at Fuller Seminary. The kingdom of God, as you know, is the basic rule of God, God's reign. And it manifests itself both in the present and in the future. The blessings of the kingdom can be seen now as well as in the future. So we do report in our book examples of evidence of the kingdom of God in business. It's not hard really to find. As most of you know, the four major leaders of ServiceMaster sought to honor God in all they did by developing people and by practicing servant leadership. Surely evidence of the presence of attributes of the kingdom of God. James Lincoln, the brother of the founder of Lincoln Electric, headquartered in Cleveland, was the son of an abolitionist preacher. He was thoroughly convinced that Christ's teachings, especially those contained in the Sermon on the Mount, were useful in running his welding business, and that the kingdom could be experienced in his business. He was put in charge of Lincoln in 1914 and remained CEO until his death in 1959. Based upon his beliefs, as you walk into the company's main plant in Cleveland, you'll see the motto, "The actual is limited, the possible is immense." Think about this. James tried to put the golden rule into practice at the company, beginning in the early 1920s. Of course, this is Matthew 7:12. Do unto others what you would have done unto you. He made numerous applications, but the one that pertains to our topic was the time and effort he spent in developing people. He did not believe that there was any practical limit to how much a person could be developed if that person was properly recruited and properly led. I've asked myself, what is the summum bonum in the workplace in God's eyes? I believe it is a company that serves and develops all the potential that exists in its human beings. Interesting here. Drucker defined leadership about this way. It's not magnetic personality, that can just as well be glib tongue. It's not making friends and influencing people, that's flattery. Leadership is lifting a person's vision to higher heights, the raising of a person's performance to a higher standard, the building of a personality beyond its normal limitations. The examples really go on. I mentioned earlier the Christian Executive Organization. We met monthly for a number of years, and I happened to have the good fortune of being on the board, and I served with Laura Nash for a time. Laura is the author of the book Believers in Business. What a joy, month after month, listening to CEOs discuss their approach to management, which almost always involved the Christian view of the dignity of their human assets and how building upon that contributed to the welfare of the customer. And there were stories of good times and bad. We heard of successes and of difficulties. But I also found that the very nature of the evidence that I was uncovering of the kingdom in practice is that it is here in a specific place for a time, and then it's gone. How long can it be in a specific place is influenced by executive succession. And the matter of executive succession is very, very difficult, both in business and in government. For example, in government, we have a definite pattern of succession. If the president dies, it's the vice president. Vice president dies, the Speaker of the House, and so on and so forth. But even with that succession, we can't be sure that the person who takes over has the ability to be president. And something similar is also true in business, although we have better ways of testing people. So I don't think we'll ever see the full blessings of the kingdom in management in this age. The perfect kingdom will usher in the kingdom in management belongs to the age to come. And we know that management is a big part of God's plans for the future for us. So the answer in summary is yes. I found that there is no final conflict between developing people, generating profit, and good management. In fact, I believe they're mutually supportive. One final example that might give you, might surprise you. We've been a part of the Vineyard Christian Fellowship for almost 30 years, including a 10-year period when I was going through my work on evidence of the kingdom. The founder, John Wimber, had a heart for the kingdom, wherever he found it. I waited after a number of evening services and his seminars to talk to him about my work, and he was encouraging to me. He was experienced in management, especially in the Christian music field. He once gave me a very surprising example of a Christian businessman in Orange County, a billionaire, who had made very large contributions to the church. The man was contemplating a move from Orange County to Texas in search of a higher quality labor force. It meant the displacement of a large number of workers in Orange County. John told me that he did not know whether to rebuke the man or to bless him. And as time went on, he decided to bless him. Given the man's faith commitment, he decided to bless him and send him on his way. Now, that's a dilemma. What do we think of that? Okay.
Dr. Zhao, do you find evidence of the kingdom of God in Chinese management?
有没有在中国的管理中，你会发现国度的样子，或者你谈国度企业会怎么样？
在中国我们一直提一个概念，就是国度企业。
In China, we actually talk a term very often in those recent years, which is Kingdom Enterprise or Kingdom Company.
Yeah. 那么关于国度企业，可能大家会有不同的概念。
But regarding to Kingdom Company, probably you have different definitions or terms you might want to use.
很多人认为说，一个企业如果按照圣经的原则来做，它就是一个国度企业。
Lots of people said if a company run by biblical principles, that's a kingdom company.
但是如果你注意到很多日本的企业，它也按照圣经的原则来做。
But you probably realized lots of Japanese companies, they run by biblical principles or integrity, whatever you have it. Right principles.
但是他们拒绝耶稣。
But they reject Christ.
日本的企业越成功，越证明耶稣是不重要的。
The more success of the Japanese company, the more strong evidence says I can live without Christ, or the least importance of Christ.
所以我把企业分成3类。
So I categorize the company as 3 kinds.
那么一类是肮脏的企业。
The first kind, they are dirty company.
他们或者是从事不正当的行业。
Or they are running in the dirty industry.
或者是从事正当的行业，但是用不正当的方式来经营。
Maybe they are in the right industry, but they are using wrong method.
那么所有的这些企业，我们都会说他们是肮脏的企业。
But all those companies, we probably can categorize them into a dirty category.
那么第2类企业呢，我把它称之为是洁净的企业。
And the second, I call them like clean company.
那么或者呢，那么他们是从事正当的行业。
And they were in the proper industry.
而且呢遵纪守法。
With respect of all the law, legal kind of things.
甚至遵守商业道德。
And they even have very good business ethics.
甚至遵守圣经的原则。
And even they respect or operate under the biblical principles.
但是他们依然还只是一个洁净的企业，
But
干净
they're
的企业。
just a clean company.
还不能称之为国度企业。
You can't call it a kingdom company.
那么国度企业一定是跟耶稣有关系。
The kingdom company must closely tied with Jesus Christ.
那我们也把这样的国度企业称之为神圣的企业。
And we call it like a divine company.
因为只有上帝是神圣的。
Because only God is divine.
那么这样的企业其实
Or
呢，
secret company.
在中国是我们相信在很多的地方在中国是刚刚开始。
And we are just in the very beginning phase of doing or trying to do something like this.
但是在过去的几年，我们一直在推这样一个。
In the past years, decades, we were on a very kind of movement on this, trying to encourage private company trying to become such a company.
那么有一个中国企业是一个餐饮的企业。
There is one company is like in a restaurant business.
那么他们遵纪守法。
And they respect the law and then doing everything legal.
遵守商业道德。
And they're very ethical.
那么也遵守这个圣经的原则。
And they also respect the biblical, principles.
不仅如此那么他们还建立起跟上帝的关系。
But not just that, they have built the close relationship with God in between God and their company.
他们把唱诗班引入到他们的餐馆当中。
They have choirs in their restaurant.
为客人来演唱。
And it just, choirs in the restaurant, and then all the customers can enjoy.
很多客人一边吃饭一边就信主了。
And then, even many customers, when they having the dinner, and then they hear the gospel, and they receive Christ.
他们在餐厅还设立祷告箱，为客人祷告。
They have a prayer box in the restaurant.
很多的客人祷告之后也信主了。
And after the prayer was answered, and then the customer really was amazed, and then they received Christ.
那么他们还这个组织了商人团契。
And they also organized like Christian businessman fellowships.
那么又通过商人团契组织了万人的布道会。
And then through the Christian businessman fellowships, they organized evangelism event with like 10,000 people or something like that. Remember, this is in China.
而且还支持了当地神学院的
They also supported the local 3 Self seminary.
他们带来了整个当地的复兴和
Their own testimony has bring forth the transformation of their region and the revival of that place.
那我们把这样的企业称之为国度企业。
And we call those such company a kingdom company.
但是很少。
But we have very few of them in China. But it is starting. Lots of people are trying very hard and doing their own job to by God's grace, are doing it.
Thank you. We'll move from, I'm going to skip a few questions in our sequence here. I'm going to move from a triumphant story to a less triumphant story, presumably. Dr. Maciariello, is American business becoming more or less corrupt?
That was a hard one to deal with. This question is more empirical than most of the others. What we know is that there is a movement in this country, and I think it's global, towards sustainability and social responsibility. But the evidence I have seen indicates that this is being done on grounds of cost-benefit analysis to aid the primary mission of the organization, which tends to place the interest of the shareholder above the customers and people. But the overall effects seem positive to me. Now, Drucker's purpose was to appeal to the virtuous and try to slow down corruption. He thought it was a battle, and he did it by trying to use the tools from government. He thought the two greatest contributions America has made to Western thought were the Federalist Papers and Taylor's work on productivity. Why the Federalist Papers? Well, constitutionalism and federalism provide the tools for handling the distribution of power and authority. And power, as we know, if you go into the garden, Satan's temptation to Eve was, if you eat from the tree of knowledge, the tree of you will know good and evil, and you'll be like God. In other words, it's the power motive that was at work in that basic fall. And so Drucker tried to counteract that by using federalism, creating strong centers and highly autonomous smaller states or divisions, if you move from political to corporate. And then at the centerpiece of his work is management by objectives, strong controls to make opinions unnecessary, a strong functioning board. And he didn't see that in many corporations. He saw it very prevalent in social sector, in some social sector organizations. And checks and balances on the CEO. Now, Drucker is often accused of aiming too high, but if we aim too low, we'll hit it. He aimed high, and in many cases, attained it amongst his clients. And he chose his clients very carefully. He chose to spend a lot of time with people he thought shared his views and whom he could help. He didn't try to create a utopian society by aiming high. His goal first was to develop the norm. This is how it should be, and then the constitutional principles that would enable well-meaning and virtuous people to achieve that norm, and it will at least slow down and impede the corrupt and the vicious. Again, the fullness of the kingdom is not of this world. So for Drucker, it was a hopeful society, it was a tolerable society, it was a bearable society, and one that had to deal with the reality of corruption.
Thank you. Dr. Zhao, is business in China becoming more or less corrupt?
中国的结束变得越来越这个腐败了，
还是越来越好一点。
还是越来越好了。中国的企业本来就腐败。
这个问题让我非常难回答。
It is a hard question.
我知道很多的基督徒会有一个观点，就是认为世界是越来越坏的。
I know lots of Christian brothers and sisters may have a view of points. You think the world is becoming bad and bad, worse and worse.
但是从中国的实践来看哈，这个比如说我们看到中国人变得越来越富裕。
But from China experiences, we see the reality. The Chinese become richer and richer, right? Have more of wealth.
中国开始越来越多的消除贫困。
China is getting more and more getting rid of the poverty.
中国也出现越来越多的大的企业和好的企业。
And then China has more and more big companies and good companies.
包括今天的中国人越来越敢说真话。
And then even now, today, Chinese are more and more, dare to say the truth.
包括批评中国政府。
Even more strict forwardness of criticizing government.
包括揭露企业的腐败。
Even uncover the corruptions of the industry or even the company.
所以我相信今天的中国的道德状况从这些方面讲，它是上升的。
I think, generally speaking, the moral standard of China from those perspectives is improving.
但是前面我提到了很多诚信的危机。
But as I mentioned before, we do have a lot of integrity crisis.
那么这又证明在某些方面我们比过去可能更腐败。
But that indicate in some areas probably we are worse than before.
所以第这个问题我只能说中国现在是一个最好的时代。
So for this question, I can only say now is the best time for China.
也是一个最坏的时代。
Now is the worst time for China.
从某些方面看，你感觉我们快要进入天堂了。
From some perspective, you think China is almost ready to enter into heaven.
但是从某些方面看，你感觉我们快要进入地狱。
But from some perspective, you probably think we are already in hell.
Let me encourage you to turn in your questions for the panel, and we have a few more questions here, but if we could collect those, soon we'll assemble those and offer some questions to our panel. We're going to switch gears a little bit from talking about business and corruption. Peter Drucker was an expert on nonprofits, a host of institutions, and he particularly was an expert and did consulting and research and advice for megachurches. So it's within Dr. Maciariello's domain and expertise to talk a little bit about the megachurches. He's actually familiar with them. So let me read this next question. The megachurch has emerged in the U.S., South Korea, and cities in Latin America and Africa, while in China there are many house churches. Is the megachurch a source of spiritual strength for South Korea, Latin America, Africa, and the U.S.?
I can report it clearer for the U.S. than for any other of these countries, although I have impressions from the information in my research. Putnam and Campbell. Putnam is a professor at Harvard, a sociologist, and Campbell is a Mormon professor who was at Notre Dame, who's the quantitative guy. I wrote a book, an empirical book called American Grace that was released last year that showed, in fact, that things had reversed in America from the time Putnam wrote his earlier book, Bowling Alone, which showed a lonely society. In American Grace, he saw the explosion of the megachurch and the outreach ministries as being very influential in developing community again, which is what Drucker was after, community and citizenship. Now, and they identify the fact that Christians, evangelical Christians, they give more, they join more, they're more involved in community, they're more involved in social sector. It's just across the board. Well, the church, when it's functioning with a strong spiritual center, Christ-centered, moves out into the community. Now, it's also creating the so-called release ministry. It's recognizing, the megachurch organizations are recognizing that they can't use all their knowledge within the church. The 80 or 90% of the people have to carry out their ministries outside the church. So they're developing the so-called release ministries, where they release people under their own jurisdiction for work in the marketplace or in social entrepreneurship, sort of what I experienced in my work on the kingdom. I know the data that are being reported for Africa and South America. I just know there's explosive growth amongst the church in Africa and in South America. I know a good part of it is Pentecostal. When we were at Oxford, Bill Pollard and I and Karen Higgins, the head of the missions department reported the pattern. And it's the pattern, of course, that we've experienced here. And that is the churches, mega churches, start with a burst of the energy from the Spirit of God. And then they settle down. For example, our former pastor of our local vineyard church is now establishing a school to train ministers in Kenya. All I know about South America is that the church is growing rapidly, and it's significantly Pentecostal, but in order to change structures, it'll have to organize and evangelize and equip people for ministry. And whether it does or not is open to question. Here it's interesting that Robert Fogel, Nobel laureate in economics, University of Chicago, in his 2002 book, The Fourth Great Awakening, talked about how revivals can either result in transforming a culture. Our American Revolution was preceded by a Great Awakening. Our Civil War was preceded by a Great Awakening. So he's asking, is this going to take hold? Is it going to be organized and so on? I think it's clearly a matter of the Holy Spirit to get the people in, but I think there is a role for management in institutionalizing it and finding that balance. We were in Brazil 2 years ago, and corruption seems rampant there too, and it's widely acknowledged. I'll just give you one example. A Ford Focus costs about $20,000 here. In the U.S., it costs. In the U.S. In Brazil, it's $50,000. What's the difference? Tariffs and corruption, and it's very, very well known amongst all the people. They just corrupt. You got to reform institutions in society. So church growth in and of itself is not enough. It's necessary, but we need to organize it and change, the social structures.
Thank you. Dr. Zhao. In China, will the house churches disappear and be replaced by megachurches?
中国这个家庭教会会不会被超大教会所代替？
有这种可能性。
There's a possibility.
这个总的来说呢，就中国什么都是跟美国学的。
China learned almost everything from U.S.
所以在美国出现的，在中国明天都有可能会出现。
So there's something here, it might be there tomorrow.
但是我个人特别这个关注小型教会甚至 micro church 的作用。
But I focus a lot of my study and my energy on micro churches, which is very small. Micro churches, not even house churches, micro churches.
这个我告诉你一个全世界最小的教会。
I tell you, the smallest church in the whole world.
但是发挥了巨大的作用。
But it has displayed the greatest results or influences.
那就是但以理和他的3个朋友组成的教会。
It is the micro church of Daniel and three of his friends. It's 4 people.
我相信他们起的作用是非常大。
I think the result influences they delivered is the biggest in the scripture probably.
耶稣所带领的教会也不大，只有12个门徒。
And the church Jesus has led is very small. It's only 13.
那我们知道当年的这个英国转化时候的这个18世纪这个关键的 那群人这个威伯福斯和他的这个那些这个朋友那些兄弟他们的教会其实也是非常小的。
We know the William Wilberforce and his small circle is also not big, and then he changed the whole history of the maybe British history or the whole slavery system.
所以我相信这个神使用了超大型的教会。
I believe God used mega churches for sure.
但是我认为在社会的转化当中特别是在某些重要的领域那么在那些重要的领域的这种 micro 教会，可能也许能够发挥更大的作用。
But I think on the social transformation perspectives, some of the micro church, especially in some of the top mountains, top influential micro churches, they will have very important roles in even the social transformation process.
我盼望着华尔街有这样的教会。
I wish there will be such a church in Wall Street.
我盼望着白宫有这样的教会。
I wish there are such micro church in White House.
我也盼望着中南海有这样的教会。
I wish there are such micro church in 中南海, which is the Chinese White House.
那是普通的教会进不去的地方。
This is not a normal church can goes to.
但是但以理和他的3个朋友可以在那里面发挥作用。
But Daniel and 3 of his friends can really serve and really influence well in those circles.
我跟 Benny 我们在中国所做的所倡导的是这样的教会。
We actually promote or we like to see more of this kind of churches.
Thank you. We're going to skip to our last 2 questions. So the next to last question, Dr. Maciariello, can U.S. law and U.S. law enforcement improve American corporate governments, or do we need a quiet, private revolution to reflect more of the kingdom of God in management?
Well, law can help, but it can't solve our problems in corporate governance. Coming from the field of control systems and looking at cost overruns and schedule delays in the Navy and Air Force, for example, every time we ran into a huge cost overrun and schedule delay, we would put on another set of controls, and it would never work. I know that the reforms from Sarbanes-Oxley have caused a lot of heartache for companies in their reporting, and have put a big burden on companies, and have constrained companies in many respects to obey the law rather than to spend a lot of time obeying the law. On the upside, I've been attracted by some specific examples. I've been attracted by the work that the president of Fuller Seminary, David Hubbard, did in his 25 years as president of Fuller Seminary with the board and the board development. And they've written up the operations of David's board during his tenure. Max Dupree was also involved with David for a long time during his tenure. David is now passed on. It's a good example to follow in all sectors of society. And I also know that there are a number of people here who are very skilled in running effective boards. So Drucker wrote an article in 1976 in the Wheaton magazine called "The Board." In other words, it didn't have its work organized. It wasn't really functioning as it should. He then went off and did nothing on the boards in the private sector until he wrote a paper on pension funds, and then he did another one on CEOs in the new millennium and so on. But he did do an awful lot on running effective boards in social sectors. And I have looked at the work, say, that was done at Fuller Seminary on the boards, and I've compared it to his article, The Board. And you see that everything he was saying was not being done in the private sector was being done at Fuller. So I think he thought our hope was in the best run social sector organizations, But there are a number of people who know how to run effective boards in both private and public companies. I just think as a group, as a whole problem, the problem of corporate government, we're a long way from solving the problem of corporate governance, not. Yeah.
Thank you. Dr. Zhao and Binny, last question. What do you think will happen to the Chinese economy and society over the next dozen years?
中国未来几十年的经济跟社会会发生什么样的情况？你可以讲看。
我相信第一点啊，中国经济还会继续朝市场化的方向走。
I think the first point, China's economy will work still towards the market economy system.
中国现在的市场经济还不太成熟。
The market is not so mature yet in China.
那么这是将来要进一步的市场化。
This is we'll have more of the market reforms in the country.
那么在除了经济的层面之外，我相信未来的中国政治会发生巨大的变革。
Apart from economics part, I think the political arena will have a lot of changes in the coming decades.
这个我相信中国会越来越多的引入西方的这种政府的治理模式。
I believe China government will have more and more Western style formats of government governance structure that will be introduced to China.
我们知道这个从20世纪到今天民主这个世界的民主化已经经历了3波的浪潮。
We know there are 3 giant waves of democracy, since the 20th century.
那么有人在期待在中国可能会这个会是第4波。
And lots of people have a higher expectations that in China that probably will come to the 4th wave of democracy.
那么第3个变化呢，就是中国人生命层面的变化。
I think the 3rd big change in the future will be the layer of life, which means Chinese life and spiritual transformation in that layer.
改革开放30年，中国的基督徒人数从不到100万人增长到今天超过1个亿。
In the last 30 years, that when China performed the reform, open door policy and economic reformation, that the Christian population has grown from 1 million to 105 million, which is 100-fold in 30 years' time.
我们估计呢，在2030年底的时候，也就是说，中国工业化、城市化完成，中国的经济现代化完成的那样的一个截止的时间里边，那么中国的基督徒人数有可能增长到超过4个亿，也就占到这个国家人口总数的30%以上。
We believe that by end of 2030, which is by the time pretty much China's urbanization is pretty much done, the modernization is pretty much accomplished. By that time, we believe the Christian population probably will grow to 400 to 500 million, which takes up 30% of the China's total population.
那我们把这个称之为叫3030的意思。
We call it a 30-30 vision.
所以未来的10年到20年会是中国变化这个最关键的20年。
In the next 10 or 20 years, that will be the critical year, a significant critical year for China's transformation process.
超过过去30年的变化。
Even far more significant, far more important than the change happened in the past 30 years. I mean, the next 30 years even far more important than what we have done in the past 30 years.
对，我们要特别的请这个各位都来关注中国的这样变化。
We really sincerely ask you to really watch and care and pray for China.
特别是关注中国人在生命层面的进步。
Especially pray for the transformation in Chinese in the spiritual arena, in spiritual level.
因为21世纪，我认为最重要的关系国家关系就是基督的关系，是美国和中国的关系。
In the Chinese life changes, I think in the 21st century, the most important international relationships is the G2 relationships, which means China and U.S.
那么在G2的关系里边呢，就是两国的基督徒就有身份者之间的关系又是最重要的。
And among this G2, the believers' relationship is very important.
那么现在我注意到，其实中美两国的无神论者已经勾结起来了。
I realized the atheists from China and U.S. already they hook up together.
他们在商业在很多方面都合作。
They did a lot of cooperations in economy in many areas. They are already a buddy.
他们举行中美战略会谈。
They have a China, U.S. Macro strategic talk conversations.
但是我们看到有神论者并没有联合起来。
But we see the non-atheist, which is the God's people, has not been united together yet.
耶稣让我们在国度里合一，但是中美两国其实在很多层面都没有合一。
Jesus said we need to be united in the kingdom, but China and U.S. in spiritual level actually is not doing very well in this perspective.
比如说两国最重要的基督徒商人就没有坐在一起。
Actually, the most important, Christian business leaders from the two countries, they have not been sit together yet.
而在刚刚过去的一个礼拜之前我参加了在纽约召开的中美的企业家的论坛。
A week ago, I was in New York for the China-U.S. business leaders meeting, which Henry Kissinger was there. But that's the secular business people. They already get together in the round table.
所以我觉得中国会发生巨大的变化。
But I know China will have significant changes in the next few decades.
而中美的这个有神论者耶稣的这些这个孩子们需要真的是加快合一。
But the God's children, the disciples of Jesus Christ from both countries, you need to run a little bit faster and work together a little bit better. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got some great questions here, such as, what does Drucker think of labor unions? Or, Dr. Zhao, how close are your observations to something like Max Weber's Protestant ethic in the spirit of capitalism? However, we're out of time. So here's what I'm going to do. If you submitted a question, come up and give me your email, and I will make sure that Joe, Dr. Zhao, Benny, answer the email. How's that? The rest of the time, let's go back and celebrate. Thank you to our distinguished guests.